Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear ladies, today we are going to start or to discuss William Wordsworth. The word is too much with us. We are going to go through the discussion following these steps, or in fact 4 steps. Number 1, the introduction and to the poem and summary. Number 2, the thematic structure. In fact, we have a technical structure and thematic. Here we have both in this poem because the poem is thematically distributed into 3 parts. So we have the thematic structure of the poem to be discussed. Also, we are going to go. We will go through the analysis of the poem and of the stanzas and line explanation. And the last thing we discuss is the theme, form, and poetic devices. Dear ladies, in form, this poem is not like the solitary reaper, which was written in the form of a ballad, because it was narrating as if it was narrating a story of a girl who was singing all the time, and the poet was, let's say, recording this song through his poetry. The form of this poem today is what we call a sonnet. The poem is one of the many excellent sonnets Wordsworth wrote in the early 1800s. Now, what is a sonnet? We have to know what is a sonnet. It is not like a ballad. The sonnet is a 14-line poetic invention. In fact, the sonnet has been invented by the Petrarchan, by the early Romantic or Renaissance, in fact, Renaissance poet Petrarch. And Petrarch has invented this type of poems in form, of course. It is here when we discuss the ballad, we define the ballad according to its content, while here the sonnet is attributed according to its form, to the number of lines. Sonnets are 14-line poetic inventions written in iambic pentameter. You know what is iambic pentameter? Meters with 5 pairs of stress, with one idea flowing through the text. Now, in a ballad, we have as if it is a full story, while in the sonnet we have one idea only that is roaming throughout the text. And there are several varieties of sonnets, 2 of which are the most famous, which are the Shakespearean sonnet and the Petrarchan sonnet. Now, Wordsworth's poem here today, the word is too much with us, is a sonnet, a Petrarchan sonnet, and it takes this form. Now we have to know what is what form is the Petrarchan sonnet. A Petrarchan sonnet is divided into 2 parts: an octave, the first 8 lines of the poem, and a sestet. Octave, it means 8 lines. Sestet, it means 6 lines. The first lines are 8 lines, which are the octave, and then it is followed by 6 lines, which are constituting the sestet. The rhyme scheme of a Petrarchan sonnet is somewhat variable. It can vary from one poem to another, but all in all, it follows a rhyme scheme of ABBA, ABBA. This is the octave because it is 8 lines. It consists of 8 lines. And the sestet, the 6 lines, are rhyming with CD, CD, CD. In most Petrarchan sonnets, the octave proposes a question or an idea that the sestet answers or commands upon or criticizes. Now, the writer, when he uses this form of poems or poetry, he usually starts his poem with an octave that shows what the problem is, that proposes some question or an idea, and in the sestet you may find an answer or a comment or a criticism, some type of a criticism, or sometimes, as has been initiated by Wordsworth, the sonnet, it has the question, it has the idea, and it has the proposition, but it doesn't have an answer. Why does the writer write a sonnet without an answer? Because there is no answer. The writer is in this way, he is desperate, he is hopeless, and he doesn't have any answer for this question. Now, dear ladies, as I told you that William Wordsworth was so much interested in nature, and he glorifies nature, and he thinks that this spontaneity of feeling or spontaneous connection between man and nature is the thing that stabilizes his entity. And that's why in this poem, The World is Too Much With Us, he is going to blame the he blames the society for this gradual vanishing connection between humankind and nature. As an introduction to the poem has been published or had been published in 1807. It is one of the central figures of the English Romantic movement. In fact, by Wordsworth, who is the central, there is some wrong here, who is a central figure in the Romantic movement, as we know. The poem laments the gradually vanishing connection between humankind and nature. The poet, why does he lament this? Because he feels that the connection between man and nature has been vanishing, has been lost. And why? Because of the Industrial Revolution and its rushing, it's making of man rushing into jobs and business and losing his entity as he loses this connection. The poet blames the industrial society for replacing the connection with nature, replacing this with what? With material pursuits. Wordsworth wrote the poem during a period of technological and mechanical innovations of Industrial Revolution, which was prevailing during the late 18th century and early 19th century, and continued, in fact, because man started to show his main interest in the material world and financial pursuit and obligations. And these obligations started to control man's life to a very, let's say, unhealthy way, in a very unhealthy degree. In the poem, the writer shows man who is rushing from one thing to the next in order to earn money one day, but for a ridiculous. Why does he is showing that man is pursuing money or running after money only to spend it in the next day? So what is the point here? The result of this is that is that man has destroyed a very important and vital part of his humanity. As I told you before, as we already have discussed, that William Wordsworth feels that our humanity is part of nature. We cannot feel our humanity unless we feel the beauty of nature. He emphasizes that man has lost the ability to connect with and find the tranquility of nature. You know, he is so much a believer in this tranquil aspect of nature that relieves man, that gives him some way to feel his life, to recollect emotions, to feel his humanity. Now, when we go through the poem, we are going to see that the poem has been divided thematically according to the theme, Of course, I told you that the sonnet contains only one idea or theme, which is the loss of connection with nature. But the writer here presents it as being divided into three steps, or into three types of discussion. First of all, he discusses the economic loss. Later, he discusses the spiritual loss, and then the cultural. This means what? This means that, first of all, he is going to discuss how man is running after something which he loses. Economically speaking, he is earning money, but he loses later the next day. The spiritual loss is when man starts to lose his own essence, spiritual essence, because by getting away from nature, he is getting away from his own nature as a human being. As for the cultural aspect, man starts to have some disbelief in the cultural background of his life, and even, of course, culture does not only is not only related to civilization, it is also related to our belief in religion, and this is what we are going to encounter in the poem. The poem is rather thematically divided more than structurally. The whole poem is revolving around how man lost the real world. Therefore, to emphasize this central loss, the poem describes this loss from three angles: the economic angle, the spiritual angle, and the cultural. Notably, the poem does not suggest a way to regain what is lost. Of course, through the poem, you are not going to find any solution to this problem or some optimistic idea that the poem is going to regain what he has lost, or the man can regain what he has lost. Rather, its tone is desperate, arguing that the humankind's original relationship with nature can never be revived because man has chosen to lose this relationship, and that's why he cannot be able to revive it again. Now we are moving to the first part of the poem. In fact, since the poem is a whole entity, we are going to discuss it line by line. Sometimes we are going to discuss 2 lines only, and later we are going to have a bulk of lines. Now, in the first 2 lines, the writer introduces the problem, the question, or in fact the proposition. As I told you, the sonnet starts with a proposition. Also, it gives us the characters, which is the speaker, of course. There is no other character, and the central confusion that the world contains the city and nature. Here we have two let's say, parts. One of them is prevailing over the other, and we are going to see the consequences of this prevailing, or this let's say, control, because we cannot combine both city and nature at the same place, in the same world. They don't seem to be actually have a room for both. I mean, in the poem we cannot have one room for both sides, the city and nature, urbanization, civilization, and nature. The first 2 lines are stated in the form of a proposition or a problem. As I told you, it is a proposition that is in need for thinking over to find a solution or answer. So it is somehow it is philosophical. It needs our thinking over in order to find an answer. In fact, the tone and attitude of the writer is in no way optimistic. As I told you, he is not. In fact, from the very beginning, we feel that he doesn't have any optimism to find a solution, because as if something which is lost and it can never be regained. Even the title is serving this aim of pessimism, of losing, of being desperate, of being of talking in despair, that the world is too much with us. Even, in fact, the poem has not been titled when it was first published. It didn't have any title because it seems to the writer, or the writer wanted to make his poem seem to the readers as being an overwhelming proposition that is hopeless, that is unanswerable, that is unresolvable. Okay, it cannot be resolved or resoluted. So even when he first published the poem, it was without a title. Now he starts with the word world. First of all, world could refer to the natural world or to some other world in the imagination of the speaker. A world created by human beings, or earth, maybe it refers to earth as a whole. Too much, of course, by the way, when we are going to go through the lines, you are going to find that there is always a blurring, a confusion in the meaning. You cannot find a definite meaning for the word. Okay, for example, the word of world, it carries more than one suggestion for the word. Too much either refers to the idea that the world is unbearable, either the speaker is so much burdened with the burdens of life, so this world is unbearable, and overfull. Of course, there are so many people, too many people in this world, or those people are too much caring for the regimes and systems of the world in which they are pursuing their lives. It is either the world, that the world is either referring to the burdens of life, or the people are too much caring for the system of this new world in which they are pursuing their lives, in which their lifestyle. There lies much ambiguity in the poem, and this ambiguity is deliberate to blur, to confuse, to make the meaning shadowy, to blur the line between nature and civilization, to show that there is some confusion between nature. There is no definite line that separates nature from civilization. You say that I love nature, but you are in fact not caring about nature. So there is some blurring line. Also, with us, here when he says with us, is too much with us, he does not only mean that it is with we. He means that this word is too much for every person in this world. So there is some collective we. With us, it means with the humans, not only for the speaker, not only for the people whom he is talking to, the readers, but also to all humans, the ones who must suffer the effects of society's growth and puzzle over its consequences. Here with us, it means that all humans are suffering because of the societal regimes and the growth of societies, and they are puzzled. They are questioning what are the consequences of such type of a life. The poem sums up human activity and lifestyle, discussing the economic layer of life within which all humans are so contrastively paying the price of losing their powers. Man is working and working, and he loses his power in order to identify himself to something which is materialistic, while his powers are supposed to identify with nature, or to at least to appreciate the surrounding elements of nature. Their powers are focusing, man's powers are focusing on material objects, not on natural or humane objects. Now humans are always late and soon, getting and spending in search of for money, while in fact they are alone, always losing either time or money. When the writer says they are always late and soon, late is contradictory to soon. late is contradictory to soon. Getting to get something is different completely. It's the contradiction of spending, giving, getting and giving. So this movement, man is moving from being late and soon. He gets and spends. Okay, in all this, I mean, in these aspects, contradictory aspects, man is losing his power. He is searching for money, while in fact, when he gets money, he is losing his own power. He is in search for money while he is spending money. He is in search for getting something, but in fact he is losing his time in that search. So there is some contradiction that there is some confusion in the idea of economic let's say in the economic economic gain. In fact, it is not an economic gain, it is an economic loss. But man, in his running, he cannot stand for a moment and think over what is he doing. Dear ladies, for the first lines, the first two lines of the poem, the poet is using special rhythm and punctuation, and the rhythm is constituted by using the stresses on the important words in a line. And it is noteworthy that the content of these two lines or the theme in these two lines is reflected in the meter of the lines, as the poet is using stressed words of too, many, too and many. In the first line to express muchness, and then he uses getting and spending in line 2 to express some sort of metonymy, to reflect that people are working in a monotonous way, and they follow a certain rhythm of life, a certain lifestyle, which is monotonous, which is not active, which is not creating activity inside them. And also he continues in line 2, and he uses the stop when he stresses lay waste, to remind the reader that the modern man, the man who is living in the city, and he's following the lifestyle of the city, in fact he is getting and spending, and he is eventually destroying himself or destroying his life, because he is spending all his life in getting and spending without adding anything to his entity as a human being. Also, in addition to this metrical employment of the lines, as the writer wants to serve his theme, of course, by using this stressing and this creation of monotonous tone, there is also the punctuation. The punctuation, the marks that are used in addition to language in order to give some or to lay attention or to lay emphasis on certain aspects. So the writer is using what we call seizures and end stops, full stops in these lines, and they are highlighting they heighten the frantic, let's say the frantic tone, the cutting off tone. And in line 2 we see that there is a semicolon which immediately ends the opening statement without a continuation. This combination, he uses a combination between a semicolon and an underscore, which is called M dash. This combination of the m dash and the semicolon, they reflect the obstacles that the city life imposes on humans. The writer wants, by drawing the attention to punctuation, to highlight the artificial nature of living in a city. The punctuation is usually used with the language to add something more to the language, sometimes something which is artificial. Okay, by adding these punctuation marks to his lines, as if he wants to show the artificial nature of the living in, or the nature of living in a city. With the final close of the of the second line, we lay waste our powers. In line 2, the writer hints at one of the poem's central questions, that where are the powers of men are led? Are they led in something profitable? I mean, spiritually, mentally, humanly profitable? In fact, the speaker will implicitly wonder whether there is any chance a human can regain these powers. Of course, if you lay your powers, if you use your powers in something that is spiritual, it means that you are not losing them. You are not losing them, and you are regain them over and over again, because they are still recreating themselves. But when the powers are led on overworking oneself, this means that the human being is losing all the chances to regain their powers. And these powers were supposed to relate and reconnect man with nature, but since these powers are wasted in the everyday life, they are having no chance to reconnect man to nature. When he says lay waste, he describes the utter destruction of those powers. They are non-regainable, they are non-recreatable, they lose themselves within this, they are destroyed, in fact. So before the poem has fully expressed the problem, it offers an opinion about whether it can be solved. Here, by saying lay waste our powers, it means that there is no hope in regaining these powers. So before, immediately, uh, with the utterance from the second line of the poem, with the utterance of the proposition or the problem, and before the poem fully expresses the problem, the writer gives this suggestion that there is no solution. Now here, this is the definition of Caesarus. It is a material pause or break in a verse where one phrase ends and another phrase begins. It may be expressed by a comma, a tick, or two slashes. Ladies, in this other two lines of the poem, in fact, we are still in the octave, in the 8-line stanza or 8-line part of the poem. In the first two lines, the writer or the speaker is weighing the economic loss. Now he moves to the spiritual loss that is dwelling in the poem. When he says, little we see in nature that is ours, we have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. When he says, little we see in nature that is ours, it means that we are so far from nature, and it is no more ours. We are no more belonging to this nature. It means what? It means not. It doesn't mean that we are not part of nature. No, it means that our nature as human beings is no more ours, and by losing one's nature as a human being, it means that someone is losing his humanity. So by losing his humanity, man started to lose himself, lose his spirituality. So here lies the spiritual loss. The poem next dwells on spiritual loss, though without forgetting the losses. Loss is the root of this loss, of this spiritual loss, is the economic. We have given our hearts away. Why the origin is economic? Because when somebody is losing his powers for the sake of materialism, he gradually starts to lose his own heart. The writer says, we have given our hearts away. It means that we have given up, we have lost, we have excluded our hearts in this toiling and in this seeking for materialism. Though it uses economic language, here the writer is emphasizing that the origin of the spiritual loss is economic, when he uses the economic language, give and take. When he people give something away in exchange for something else. So the people here in the city are exchanging their heart, or they give away their hearts in exchange for something. This line adds another perspective to the depiction of loss. Of course, there is an emphasis on the idea of loss. The price of material gain and industrial progress is the human heart itself. So all this materialism and industrialism and these gains, economic gains, are at the expense of what? At the expense of the human heart. And that's why we see that this industrial revolution has moved on the necks of old men, on the necks of children, of women. All of them are taken in the process of toiling for money. And since the human heart is a symbol of life and emotion, so in the progress of this material gain, it is the emotions, the man's life are lost. In exchange, what do people get in return? When they give away their hearts in exchange, they receive a boon. A boon means what? It means something, some gain, some type of gain. But when the writer describes it as a sordid boon, it means that this boon, this gain, is something dirty and immoral. In exchange for the industrial progress, people have reduced themselves to an almost less than human state. Of course, the speaker suggests that this loss of humanity outweighs the material gain. It means what? It means that this loss of humanity is exchanged for what? For the material gain. So as a result, we are losing our nature. We are going to be out of tune and out of our nature. We are no more. As he says, nature that is our. Little we see in nature that is ours. We are no more reflecting things related to nature, or nature moves us not. In the coming lines, he's going to say that nature is no more moves us. It is no more related to us. People have fallen from an ideal natural state into one of despair by exchanging their hearts for money or for materialism. Man had fallen from the ideal nature by which God had created him, or in which God had created him, to some state, some unnatural state of despair. Having given away their ability to access deep, enduring emotions, they are numb to the beauty of the natural world, spiritually unmoved by it. When man gives away his ability to dig deep, or to reconnect himself deeply with nature, and reconnect himself to his real emotions, man started to be in a numb. he is in oblivion, he is sorry, not in oblivion, he is in some state of sleep, and somebody who is asleep, he cannot see the beauty of the natural world. So he is spiritually or he is emotionally will never be moved by this beauty. In these lines, the speaker contrasts nature to the world. And of course, he is capitalizing the letter N, nature, in order to show his glorification of nature. He reveals that while people spend their time in acquiring possessions, material possessions, the true beauty of the earth cannot be owned by man anymore. It is in front of man, but this beauty is no more sensed. It is no more elevates man from the materialistic world. That's why it cannot be owned anymore by man. The writer reveals that very few things that people see in nature actually belong to them. He then so that he laments, he is sorry to say, he is sad to say that we have given our hearts away. We have lost our hearts, the hearts by which we are revealing the secrets of nature, the hearts by which we can sense or we can feel the beauty of nature. Since we have given up our hearts away, so we are no more able to belong to nature or to sense the things surrounding us concerning the elements of nature. He believes that where we should enjoy nature, though it is not ours to own, instead we are filled with greed and we acquire wealth and worldly possessions rather than enjoying. Although we can enjoy nature, although we are living in the places where there are many beautiful elements of nature, but our greed and our acquisition of worldly possessions, our interest in worldly possessions, materialistic possessions, make us unable to enjoy these elements, although these elements are still there. The speaker describes an abstract collective act, this time of every person giving away his heart. He says, when he says we, he is collecting all human beings under this word we. There is a collective action, a collective way of living. Everything they personally care for in the name of supposed progress. This reveals a sense of this means what? This means under this we, all individuals have this sense of suffering and loss beneath the sweeping societal change, which means industrial society. With the pronoun we in the poem's first half, the speaker thus describes how industrial life has isolated people in general from nature and partially raised their unique identities. It means what? It means when he generalizes this state of losing interest in nature and losing the connection with nature, as if he wants to say that our identities started to lose even its uniqueness, because what identifies man is his spirituality, and this is the main part of his identity. So since this spirituality has been lost because of the loss of this connection with nature, this uniqueness also of their identity has been lost too. To continue this part of the poem, we see that the speaker is describing the beauties of nature. When he and how does he show this beauty, and how does he describe it? He describes this beauty through the connection that relates all the elements of nature one to another, and that's why he refers to the beauty of nature without reference to man, because when man lost his connection, He was out of the tune of the natural world. So by this, he is losing his own beauty. The speaker is describing nature and the beautiful nature that most people are missing out on. He describes the sea and the wind and the flowers, this ocean that reflects the moonlight on its surface, and the peaceful, momentarily windless night, which is like flowers whose petals are folded up in the cold. These natural features still exist. All these elements of nature are still there. They have not lost their beauty. But the problem is where? The problem that is that man cannot appreciate them anymore because he is too busy with his materialistic life to get notice of these beautiful elements of nature. And by this connection between the elements of nature, there is a tune, there is a rhythm of the natural world. Each element is completing the beauty of the other elements, and this beauty, as I said, it is so rhythmic, so spontaneous, so mutual to each other. I mean, the elements of nature are appear so mutual to each other that they create this beauty of nature. And since man had chosen to lose his appreciation to nature by the too much working and too much um involvement in the business and the materialistic world and the industrial world, he is no more part of this rhythm. As a result, those rhythms have no emotional impact on us. His description of these parts of nature in his description of these parts, the writer is using personification. When he says this sea bears her bosom to the moon, as if there is a very close relationship, a very intimate relationship between the sea and the moon, to the extent that the sea is she, opens her bosom to the moon and embraces the moon on her bosom. Okay, so why now? What is the intention of the writer, to describe these elements of nature through personification? Um, uh, as if the writer gives or makes an invitation to the reader to feel that all these elements are just like him, are just like people, are just like persons. And when he feels that these elements are just like him, he might reconnect with these elements through the description. He says the sea bears her bosom to the moon, which suggests an intimacy, as I said, between the moon and the sea. The wind howl. The word howl, it means to create a sound, or it might refer to the wind, or to cry to man, or to bark to animals. This gives the wind the human emotions of sorrow, or at least animate emotions of sorrow or grief for man's abandoning its beauty. When somebody cries, or when let's say when the dog or animal barks, this is a sign of sadness. So when the writer gives the wind a description that it is able to show emotions of grief or sorrow or sadness, as if the wind is showing its grief for man's abandoning or getting away from the beauty of nature, as or beauty of the wind, as it is part of the beauty of nature. The flowers are sleeping. When he says the flowers are sleeping, he's also personifying the flowers. And this again, he gives an invitation to the reader to feel this connection with nature. It paints a picture of nature and allows the reader to understand what is he missing out on by being caught up in worldly possessions and greed. These lines are the speaker's final exclamation that we are out of tune. we are away from this tune, from this rhythmic picture of nature, because we are so caught up in this worldly wealth or worldly um, pursuit. He says that even when the sea bares her bosom to the moon and the winds howl, humanity is still out of tune and looks on uncaringly, and it means that a man looks uncaringly, unappreciating this spectacle of the storm as part of nature. Now, dear ladies, starting with this part of the poem, which is the sestet, the last six line part of the poem, as we have already mentioned, that in the sestet, in the Petrarchan sonnet, the octave discusses the problem or the proposition, and the sestet, it is supposed, the speaker or the writer is supposed to present the solution. But when we go through the sestet, we will not find any solution. As we said from the very beginning, the tone, the attitude of the speaker is so pessimistic, is so desperate. It shows despair, and that it shows hopelessness, that there might be no solution to find in concerning man's state under the change of the industrial revolution and the materialistic world. In the sestet, what does the writer presents? The speaker here is so desperate that he starts to ask for the help of God when he says, "Great God," as if he is asking for his help. But at the same time, with asking God for help, he is wishing that he were raised in a culture that worshipped many gods, not the Almighty God. So here we are starting with what type of loss? The third type of loss, which is the cultural loss. Of course, during these days, or those days during which the writer had written his poem, religion has been already outdated. Why? Because of the scientific theories. But still, we know that Wordsworth is somehow not away from religion, but because of his despair, he wishes another culture in which he worships not God but the many gods. Why? We are going to know that away from the state or church teachings, he, standing on the pleasant patch of grass, might be calmed and heartened by the image of the ocean before him. He wants to, let's say, transfer his soul from this culture, which is reigned by the church's teachings, by the state's teachings, which are not fostering the spiritual aspect of man. On the contrary, and he wants to foster, to enrich his spirituality by standing on the pleasant patch of grass. He wants to regain this spirituality by standing in the middle of nature, and he transfers his soul, transfers himself to another culture, of course, in his imagination, by when he contemplates the image of the ocean in front of him. He says what? He says, if I transfer my soul, if I transfer myself from this culture, of course through wishes, he might see the Greek god Proteus taking shape before his very eyes. He might see this god in front of his eyes, or hear another Greek god who is Triton blow his legendary spiral grooved conch shell. Now we have to know who is Proteus and who is Triton. With the switch to I, first of all, we have to know why did he move from we to I. In the second half, in the sestet, he switches from we to I in an attempt to respond to those changes and in doing so he provides an example of a person living within that industrial society. He wants to emphasize that by switching to I, he wants to glorify the changes that are happening to every individual in that society. Okay, for every person living within this industrialized society. The speaker here swears an oath that he would rather be a poor pagan. He wants to be a pagan. He wants to be not Christian, a pagan. And even if it were, he would be rather a poor one. Then it is better for him to be a poor pagan than be so distracted by worldly worth. It is better for him to, because he believes that the Greeks, although they were pagan, but their spirituality was so rich, and he prefers to be pagan than being distracted by the worldly wealth, because this worldly wealth is emphasized by the church and by the state, so as to render himself unable to enjoy the true beauties of life, because this distraction of the materialistic world, of the materialistic interests, had made him unable to enjoy this beauty of life, the beauty of life. He appeals to God and even exclaims that he would rather be a pagan than to be out of touch with nature. It's better for him to be pagan rather than being away from nature. In these final lines, the speaker reveals that if he were a poor pagan, he would have glimpses of nature that would give him joy and hope, or at least make him feel less forlorn. Less forlorn, it means less away from or less alienated from nature. He would when he prefers to be with these two pagan gods, because Proteus was thought to be able to tell the future, as if he is prophesying. He has the prophecy of telling the future. Although this god did not want to doing this, prophesying the future, but he had this ability. And when he refers to Triton, Triton was the pagan god that was said to be able to calm the waves of the sea. So he wants to be in touch with Proteus and with Triton in order to feel the beauty of nature, the beauty of spirituality. Of course, Proteus is a reference to spirituality, because he is prophesying. He has some prophecy. And for Triton, he wants to be in the middle of nature, because he refers to a god who is calming the waves of the sea. So he's playing with nature. So the writer here, or the speaker, in fact, the speaker is preferring to be away from his culture, to live in another culture. Although this culture was pagan, although it was a primitive culture, yet he feels that he can regain his connection with nature and with his spirituality through paganism, or through referring to Greek gods. Of course, this what we call this as classical allusion, or Greek allusion, when somebody refers, or some writer refers to the myths of the Greek, or to the Greek mythology. Yes. By his reference to paganism, or in fact, when the writer talks about paganism and this wish to transfer from his culture to another culture, he was looking at the sea and he was enjoying nature, and he, with this joy, he can prophesy, or he can feel that he is so long, so part of nature that he can, because nature is an everlasting in the history. He feels that he is so long, just like history, long enough to see Triton and Proteus. In these final lines, the poem describes a cultural loss, and its tone of resignation suggests that this loss is permanent, and that's why the writer tends to make this wish of giving up all his culture, because he has already lost this culture. The speaker invokes Greek paganism, introducing a version of society in, in which nature played a larger role in the human life. Why does he wish to invoke Greek paganism? Because during these days of the Greek mythology, nature was so important, a very important part of human life, and it played a larger role in man's life. But the pagan tradition is a creed outworn. It's a relic and no longer useful, and this emphasizes the idea or the despair of the speaker. Once the speaker acknowledges the uselessness of past traditions, his wishes come across as more fanciful than serious. It is only a matter of imagination. I'd rather be a pagan, and so might I. So might I. He does not say, so am I. They do not represent what the speaker believes is possible. In fact, he believes that it is only a wish, it is only a matter of imagination. But still, his wishes are still possible. Although he cannot move himself from his reality, but he can make this wish, and these wishes are possible. As a member of modern society, the speaker cannot access nature in a way to make him or herself less forlorn. As a person who is living in this modern society, he is unable to be unalienated from nature. He is alienated. He is forlorn. This doesn't mean that nature has been destroyed. Nature is still there. The elements are still there. There is the pleasantly, which is still existing. It is just not appreciated by the modern man. But when the speaker is so much interested in nature, he can be soothed, which means that his heart is at relief. At this moment of emotional despair, the best he or she can do is to imagine the past that is in its fullest form, yet it is lost. This past is lost and inaccessible. In conclusion, the poem shows how modernity has eroded not just people's connection to nature, but also people's sense of nature and agency. The poem subtly suggests that modern life, city life, has led to a sort of uniformity, which creates monotony, uniformity of experience, and that individuals are powerless to resist society's homogenizing effect. Now, ladies, the last to sum it up, the main theme or major theme of the poem is that the loss of nature and the natural world and the impacts of the busy life. The poet argues that people have forsaken their souls for material gains. In fact, the whole text of the poem denounces materialism. It is against materialism. It is objective, or it is objecting to materialism and industrialism, because the poet sees that man's activities, when approached in this way, deprives him or deprives mankind of the true purpose of their life. They are losing their life, in fact. They are purposeless. Using the figurative language, Wordsworth highlights the idea that nature gives spiritual pleasure and enjoyment, and that we should know its worth. He adds that the lust for power and money has made people hollow, empty, havoc, as they have readily given their hearts to the things they need for material comfort. Now, concerning the poetic devices, there are so many devices used here. We have five, in fact, not four, five devices. One is personification, as we have already discussed. Number two, allusion. The Greek mythology is the allusion is illusioned by the poet for two aspects, for two reasons. One, he wants to gain some spiritual enrichment, and second, it is an escape, it is a dream for him to go there. It is a landscape for him, because he wants to give up this cultural materialism to gain some spiritual culture. Number three, imagery. Also, the writer is using images, and I think the image is only related to the sleeping flowers, although it is also personification. Number four, simile. The writer is using this device to compare something to another, to let the readers know what it is. There is only one example of simile in the poem, when he says like sleeping flowers. Metaphor. There are two metaphors used in the poem. One is the metaphor of the 10th line, suckle in a creed outworn. Creed represents mother that nurses her child. With this, ladies, we finish the lecture. I hope you will find all this explanation beneficial to you, useful to you. Thank you very much for your listening.